because I'm professional, I will remember to unmute myself. Hey everyone, Dan here from Variant Roles. And because we've had so much interest in the community in general and people asking, I thought that I would put together a small streaming tutorial specifically for tabletop role-playing games. This, I guess, would be broadly applicable to things like just chatting or things like that as well, because most of the tutorials out there are really focused on video game streaming, which is very similar. And I think if you can stream video games, you can stream tabletop. But I think the pain points are a little bit different between the two of them. And yeah, that's right, Kyle. As you said, this shit's hard. We forget to unmute ourselves all the time because we're professionals, right? So I am going to do this tutorial running Streamlabs OBS. And the way I'm doing that is I'm using standard OBS to run the stream while I set up Streamlabs OBS as the recorder. I could have did it the other way around, but I wanted it to look like a fresh install of Streamlabs OBS, which essentially is what's going to happen now. I actually deleted Streamlabs off of my computer, deleted its application data, and as you can see, I just ran a fresh install and it's about to launch for the very first time. So it'll be as close as possible to a pretty generic setup. And yeah, that's a good point. Corey mentioning in chat to see if this differs from his setup. So a lot of people hanging out in chat are people that run streams already. And so I'll state right up the front, there's no one way to do it. There's lots of ways to set this up. Some of them might be better than how I do. This is just how I have figured it out, or what I've pieced together from different tutorials or asking questions of other people on Twitter. So yeah, so let's get started. So as you can see, I just installed Streamlabs OBS and I'm going to run it for the very first time. And I'm just capturing this whole display. So we will wait while it starts up. And you might be wondering why Streamlabs versus generic OBS. And I think Streamlabs has got just that extra little bit of polish on it, plus the integration with Streamlabs stuff itself, like alerts, just comes in handy. And Streamlabs OBS has like the built-in chat and all of that sort of thing. So I think that's all pretty handy. So we're going to connect it with our Twitch account, which in this case will be the Variant Roles account. And so we will just have to log in, and I'll grab my password from my password manager. Security, folks. I use a random-ish alphanumeric password that I keep in a locker. With a master key that is obnoxiously long. All right. Okay, so it's going to import some scenes because I had some scenes I was already playing with, and this is one of the other handy things is they're saved in my Streamlabs account, the data online, so it'll pull them back. I did have more scenes than this, but I actually had deleted all my old scenes because I'm messing around and redoing stuff, but I'm going to do those. And I do have the option here to import settings from OBS or start fresh, and I'm going to start fresh. And it gives me this option to optimize. And so it looks at my CPU, looks at my RAM, looks at my settings, it pings and sees what my latency and bandwidth are with respect to my internet service and optimizes settings for this. So I think this is pretty important. You might need to manually tweak them later, especially if your internet is inconsistent. But I think it's really, really good to start it fresh and let Streamlabs optimize these settings and it will tend to pick better settings for you. And this, incorrect settings or like bit rates that are too high, I think is one of the leading causes of having like lots of dropped frames, because you're streaming at a bandwidth higher than what your internet can handle. Yeah, that's right, Corey. You might have to tweak yours for having Zoom open, depending on your PC. Um, Zoom, because it's a web chat, which is what we tend to use for all of our TTRPGs. You might use Discord, you might use Skype, but running that video conferencing software is going to use some resources as well. That's probably true, Kyle. That streaming while I'm testing might affect my results, which, yeah, I see zero on the bandwidth test here, and that's fine because I'm gonna go back and reset this up after anyway. Um, and it's not gonna run a stream at the moment. So if its settings are off, that's fine. And for me, it might not matter because I have 1 gigabit internet up and down, and I don't know, 16 gigs of RAM and a Ryzen 5 CPU. So I've got more than enough to handle stuff. All right. Yeah, so for some people, yeah, your video chat might use up a hell of a lot of your upload bandwidth. All right, so Streamlabs has these scene collections, which I didn't use when I first set up, and I highly recommend it, using scene collections. So see here, manage all, and you can have different scene collections. I tend to set up one per show, or for like a group of closely related shows. It makes it easy to manage your scenes, which, depending on how you do scene transitions between like wait screens and main loading screens, it just so you don't have anything too cluttered up. So I'm going to create a new one that I'm going to call test. And we'll switch to that. So we'll use this test scene collection for all of our scenes for this. And all right, so let's see what our settings are actually at. So we've got the settings here in the upper right for our global settings. So one thing you'll have to put in, obviously, first you're going to have to set your Twitch streaming service. This is all info it pulled from my Streamlabs account, so I didn't have to re-enter it. But you need to put in your stream key. Rather important. Output settings, so we can see here things like the bit rate, what it's set at, my software encoding, audio bit rate, where it's going to do local records. Again, it's pretty much pulling a lot of this stuff from default settings. So we have here, for instance, different recording formats. Most of this, other than the bit rate, the video bit rate, are things we probably don't have to touch. And if we enable advanced, we can look at sort of what our encoder presets are for. And mine is set at very fast. I will probably change this to ultra fast afterwards, because I think it knocked down to very fast because I'm essentially running two streaming encoders at the moment. Yeah, we'll set MooBot later. All right. So there's your audio. Now, one thing I always do here, so you've got a bunch of desktop audio devices, including default, which is whatever your default audio is, which is basically desktop audio. That's often you're covering both your mic and, say, headphones. You can do different things. The number one, in my experience, cause of having audio that slips through on a wait screen when you were pretty sure you had all your mics muted is these default audio devices. Because they might be running, they basically get embedded in scenes. So we can see them here, desktop audio and mic auxiliary, added automatically in the scenes, and they're not added as a source. And so especially if you hide them and don't touch them, they might get unmuted at some point. and then they're sitting there running in the background on a wait screen and it's picking up your mic or something. So I change all of these to disabled. All right. And then we've got video settings here. So we can see the base canvas. So mine's set at 1080. Output scaled resolution, you'll see it's set to 720, so 720p. And this is pretty common. I think Kyle in chat mentioned earlier. So uploading at 720p instead of 1080 can save a lot of headaches. It's obviously going to use less upload bandwidth, so that's good. Depending, like mine, I can upload 1080 just fine. But it can also sometimes affect viewers if you're streaming at 1080 versus 720. So there's a lot of recommendations to downgrade. And quite honestly, we're essentially talking heads on a screen with TTRPGs. The difference between 720p and 1080p is going to be pretty minimal, I think. So often setting it to 720 is good. There's a bunch of other things in here. Hotkeys. I use hotkeys pretty extensively for my audio to make shortcut hotkeys on my keyboard for muting and unmuting my Zoom and mic with the same keyboard configuration. That's not going to show up in here because I don't have them, and you got to set that up in per scene collection audio. But it will make things a lot quicker, and I'll show that a bit later. Again, advanced. This has a whole lot of stuff. I changed processing priority to high on mine so that my OBS, right? So my Streamlabs OBS has the highest CPU priority on my system. So even because basically when I'm streaming TTRPG, Streamlabs and Zoom are the two most important things running on my system. And I think this defaults to normal or above normal because most people are streaming video games, and so they want the CPU running for the video games. And pretty much everything else we can leave. Remote control is really handy. In a future thing, I will show how to do that and set it up. But you can set up a Streamlabs app on your iOS or Android device. So you can set it up on a phone, or you can set it up on a tablet, which is what I've done before, and use it to control scenes with a touchscreen interface. So that can also be very handy. All right, so we'll leave that. And we're just going to build a basic scene. So we've got a scene already set in our things. And so to start off, let's build a wait screen. So let's build a starting soon. Okay, so for our starting soon, we need the image. And I'm not going to get into how to make all the graphics associated with overlays. I'm going to move that out. But what we are going to do is add an image. So we're going to add an image that we have on our screen. And so we just add source, add image, browse. I've got all mine set in this design folder, overlays, and right here I've got our generic variant roles starting soon screen. So we're going to load that in. All right, and done. Oh, yes, one thing I have to do. I forgot and didn't notice this. Because I have I've got two different monitors, and one of them is an ultra wide. My video resolution, see this 2560 by 1080. Right, there we go. So now I've got a proper, just regular widescreen resolution on my canvas. All right, so we've got that. And the only other thing we might want to add is we might want to add some music. So let's add just a media file. So we'll click Add Media Source. And we'll add a bit of music. We want it to loop because we don't want it to just close. And it's going to be a local file. And we've got a bunch of stuff here. So some of the ones we use from Ben Sounds, for instance. So the dubstep one, and we'll put that in. And we can see it there. So now we've got on the mixer. We can see, and the audio's super loud. It's just playing. It's way up in the red. So we'll want to crank that down. And we're not going to hear it. That's if this was streaming live, we would hear it there. But we're not going to hear it ourselves when we're setting it up. So those media sources we won't hear. Although if we want to, we can. So one of the things we can do is we can do monitoring of audio. Yeah, yellow is good. So you don't want to be in the red. So I had a question in chat about where we want audio levels. And basically in the upper end of the green or into the yellow is good. That's basically where we want to be. Obviously, it's really hard to balance audio in our case because individual people on the Zoom call are going to have different audio levels, and we've only got one audio input for Zoom as a whole. So we just try and balance what we can. And yeah, being in that, obviously your end user is going to adjust their audio level to their own comfort, but you don't want to be in the red. That's sort of too high. So if you're peaking in sort of the low yellows, low to mid yellows, that's fine for your peaks. And the music's generally supposed to be loud in this case because it's dubstep. So we'll leave it at that. If you wanted to hear this versus just seeing your levels, we can do audio monitoring. And trying to remember where that is. Advanced, I believe. Yes. All right. So in our advanced settings, we can say what we want our audio monitoring device to be. So in my case, I'm going to set it to my external audio device. So all my audio is running through this M Audio M-Track 2x2. So my mic goes into it, but my headphones are plugged into it. So my audio routes both ways. So I'm going to set it to the speakers. So here, if I wanted to, I can go here and turn monitoring is off. Monitoring only means it won't output to the stream. I will hear it, but it won't go anywhere else. Or monitor and output. If I set it to monitor and output, it should then start running through to mine. In this case, I'm not hearing it at the moment, but that's because my audio is all running very complicated. So that would be one way that we could hear it. All right, and so that's the basics of a starting Zoom screen. You could add additional things. Streamlabs OBS has, like I said, all of these alerts and things like that. So in our case, I could add something like the alert box. And it will pop up. And you can test it, but you could just set that wherever you wanted. I usually don't necessarily set those on the starting Zoom screens, but you could. All right, so you could set that there. All right, so let's create an actual TTRPG scene. So we'll just call this game and we'll start a new scene. And so the same sort of thing. So we need a background. And in this case, we have backgrounds made as images. So there's two main ways to make these overlays, right? So, and we often use the word to mean the two different things. Obviously, what I am constructing right now in OBS is an overlay, right? What I'm constructing on this canvas is an overlay. In our case, we often use just an image with all of our info made on the preset image, and we call that an overlay. In this case, it's basically a background, right? So I'm going to use a background image. The background image has, the VR logo on it. It's got, player names and things like that. It's got cutouts for our windows. It's all there. The other way is we could make image assets for all of our individual things, and we could composite the whole thing in OBS. And we could do that either way. Neither one is better than the other. They do each have their pros and cons. Obviously, making as many things as possible into the image makes it simple to set up, but you do then have to change the image all the time. It makes it a little harder to change things on the fly, and there's a few things you can't do. But it tends to be simpler. So we're going to start with that. And in OBS, the way Slobs or Streamlabs OBS works now, I have to actually click this little thing that I want to add a new source instead of selecting from things that have already been added. It's a little annoying. That's okay. We're going to set background, add source, and we're just going to browse for that image file, which is in all my overlays. And I'll use one of my bleeding edge backgrounds. Actually, let's show the difference between really, really simple. So we'll use one of our Ravnica ones. All right. And that's basically that. So we've got a background loaded, and it's got all of our info, right? It's got the stream title, it's got the logo, it's got all the information for players, and that's that for the background part. Now, the other thing we can do is if we want a little bit fancier, we can add a slideshow where we have multiple background images that will then like rotate through information. So we use that in some of our other things, but I'm just going to leave it at this. All right, so the next big thing that we need to do is we need to actually get things into there. So we need to get our players' beautiful faces in, and we use Zoom. You could use Discord. There's various other things. But one thing that I will have to do is turn off my webcam so that Zoom can see it. All right. So I started a Zoom call. So let's bring that up here. So we've got Zoom. I'm just going to start a new meeting. And I get the pop-up, right, with my Zoom call. And I'm going to move that off screen. And I'm going to move this off screen for now. And we want to capture that. So this won't work perfectly in this case because we don't have multiple people. We just have one. But this will show you the basics of how it's done. So we're going to add this in as a window capture. So we're going to add a new source. And we're going to go to window capture. We add the source. We're going to call it Zoom. And we get here, and so we're going to select the window, and it's this Zoom meeting. And we're going to say, we'll find another window if it's not this one, and we'll remove capture cursor because that can be annoying. And then we're done. And, oh yeah, okay. So Streamlabs does this periodically. I don't actually know what the reason is, where it will only move and it won't let me resize. And I know I figured out once before how to do it on the fly, but the quickest thing I have figured out how to do it is to actually close OBS. And reopen it. And that should fix it. And everything I did so far should already be there. All right, there we go. Okay, so obviously, so we can resize this, right? Just click and drag, and we can also crop it by holding Alt and dragging in. We can resize. And what we're going to do is make sure that we put those in behind the backgrounds, because those cutouts are transparent. And then it's there, all nicely framed. And so we can just keep adding. And I've done before where I've added each one as an individual, so that they're called Zoom 1, 2, 3, and 4. But we can actually just keep adding more and cut them out. So obviously, when you've got multiple people, they're going to show up in different regions of the window. So you just crop them to resize, and again, just drag them behind the backgrounds, and there you go. Yeah, so Kyle in chat mentioned having problems resizing them even with the Alt key. I'm not sure. I've not had a lot of problems other than when it does that bug where it doesn't want to resize at all, so it doesn't change from the hand to the double-ended arrow. Mine pretty much always resize really smoothly. So it should be quick. Oh, okay, right. So you're running into that problem too. Yeah, I don't know what that is. Obviously, if it happens live in a stream, it's a problem. I believe that I have fixed it before. Like it just resized instead of changing the borders. Yeah, so with the Alt, you can only do it from the middle, right? You can't do it from the corner. So you can't do like a free resize from the corner by holding the Alt key. It's a crop function. So you can only do it from the middle points. Or you can only do it from the edges, not from the corners. The corners will only resize and won't work if the Alt key is held down. So changing the borders, you got to do it from the other ones. So anyway, so you would just continue adding those, right, until you had 6. And so have them all in. And then we also need audio. All right, I will answer that question, 12-sided guy, in 1 second. I'll get the audio in first. Actually, the audio is a little bit complex in my case. It's not complex to add, but I have to explain some differences. So I will answer it. So 12-sided guy in chat, and actually, if I open that right side panel, it should load the chat window. All right. And it won't show the question because it wasn't there before, but I should just keep those open. So 12-sided guy asked, I notice on a lot of streams that when someone disconnects, the cameras get all messed up. One camera split between 2 frames, etc. I've seen others where this doesn't happen. What causes this, and how do some streams prevent it? I can only speculate on the streams where it doesn't happen, because my guess is that they're not using a video call software like Zoom or Discord. So the problem is with something like Zoom or Discord, what it does is it just tiles windows into the space, right? Whatever the window size is, and it dynamically shifts those as you resize the window or whatever else. And they're not fixed, right? So it's like first in, last out. So as someone disconnects and reconnects, they'll automatically go to the bottom. And so it adjusts where people are. And if it all depends, but if someone drops out and it doesn't affect any of the other rows, then those cameras won't be affected. But any cameras in a row that loses a camera will be affected, and anything after it, because it will adjust them, because it basically tiles them in rows and columns to fit, and it does it from the center. So it'll add a camera in the center. So like if another person jumped on this call, it's going to split it horizontally, so we've got one on top and one below. And if someone else adds, it's going to do like 2 on top and 1 below, and so on and so forth. So when someone disconnects, it does that. there are some other higher end software other than Zoom where you're doing this compositing thing that basically combine what Zoom does and what Streamlabs OBS does. So like vMix. vMix is compositing like TV software, so it's doing what OBS does. But also if you pay extra money, and it's expensive software versus Streamlabs is free and OBS is free and Zoom is inexpensive, you can do the video calls in that piece of software as well. So like Encounter Roleplay and some of the bigger channels use like vMix. So that's going to prevent that from happening because I think they're all like individual windows. And so they're not doing this window capture. Now, the best way to deal with this is ideally anyone who has an unstable connection. If you know someone tends to have a really unstable connection, having them come into your Zoom call last will tend to create the fewest problems in rearrangement. The other thing you should do is you should make separate scenes for different number of players. So if your normal is like this, like a 6-person layout, right? You've got a scene for that, but you also make a scene for 5 and maybe even 4. So that'll be handy in when you're just missing players. And so you don't need to adjust your main one. But it will also let you, if someone drops out, you can switch to a scene and it's already set up for handling a different number of Zoom windows. So that's kind of a good thing. Okay, so now audio. We have to add audio sources back in because we turned off our defaults. So you need audio inputs. Now, for a lot of people, you're going to have one device like default or desktop audio or whatever that's handling all your audio. So your mic and Zoom and all of that. I use Voicemeeter. And so I'm going to have 2 devices. I've got one device that is my mic, and I've got one device that handles the output from Zoom. So how I'm going to know what ones I need is if I go to Zoom and go to my settings and go to audio, we will see here a speaker and a microphone. So Voicemeeter output in my case, or this might be a name. So it might be microphone or this line 1, 2, right? M audio. And we've got a speaker. Those are what I want to add in to OBS. So I've moved those off screen. In my case, they're all audio inputs. I'm going to add my mic first. And so you see it defaults to default. And I want Voicemeeter output. That's where my mic is routed through. And I add it. So now you can see there on the mixer that it's bobbing away, right? Because it's added in. And I'm going to add another one for Zoom. And in my case, it's the Voicemeeter auxiliary output. And done. And so both of them are in there. I like my mic to sit on top, so I just change where they're arranged. I like my audio to sit below my graphics. Yes, Kyle and Sam asking about a Voicemeeter tutorial. Absolutely, that's going to be tutorial 2, I think, is Voicemeeter. And depending, because tomorrow's a holiday for me, I might do that tomorrow. And because I think it's relatively simple to get set up. When it's explained to you. If you're familiar with mixing boards, it's just like a digital version of a mixing board. So once you sort of think about it as roots of audio, like you would think of them physically on a mixing board, it really works pretty much the same way. So I will do that. And so here is a basic setup. I've got my mics, I've got Zoom. Zoom is set up with these window captures. And that's it. We would add starting, like our starting soon screen, we could add our intermission, we could add our end, right? And we're just switching between scenes. There's some things we can do with like studio mode and things like that. We won't get into that. although that makes it handy to edit on a scene and that isn't active and then switching to it. So you can edit a scene while you've got starting soon broadcasting. But from a simple perspective, if you get everything, and this is why we say 30-minute call time beforehand, right? You can get stuff set up. Once you get going, basically these just reload in. One of the things that will happen is every time you open this with like a new Zoom call, you basically have to come into your Zoom windows and set these back to the correct Zoom meeting because they'll get set to something else. So moving the cameras alone 10 to 15 minutes, absolutely. Although it shouldn't quite be every time. Once you have this scene set, basically don't change the dimensions of your Zoom windows. So leave it between calls. So then once you get that set up, it should, all of these Zoom windows, once you get them reconnected to your Zoom meeting so that they're displaying something, they should be cropped exactly how they were previously. So the only thing you should really need to do most of the time is just move it, from one thing to the other, right? Because people will be in a different order. And so, you just need to move them around. You might sometimes have to do a little zhuzhing because like people sit in different cameras and different positions. And so yeah, the crop shouldn't totally reset, but for a different person, if you cropped it really tight to their head or whatever, I tend to crop mine pretty big. I try to crop it close to the actual dimensions that they appear on the Zoom window, other than just cropping out the bottom, like where it shows their name and stuff like that. Other than that, it's pretty close. So, but yeah, the problem is obviously for people who slouch like really low in their camera view, or things like that, then I have to recrop a little bit. Running audio, yeah. So exactly. So it depends a little bit. Voicemeeter can come in really, really handy here. So can things like virtual cables and all of that. But if you just add your desktop audio device, that's where Zoom is sort of default playing to. And that might be your Zoom, right? As Kyle mentioned, that could just be exactly how your Zoom output is routing. You just then have to be really good about closing off external programs and alerts and notifications or muting them so that they don't come through on the stream. Like Discord alerts and Slack and email and whatever else, if you don't want those coming up. And if you can get into things if you have virtual audio cables and Voicemeeter and stuff like that, where you can route whatever web browser Roll20 is in. So if it's in Firefox, you can route Firefox specifically through Voicemeeter to a specific audio output and add it just as a third output here. Yeah, that's right. I turn off most audio notifications as well. All right, so it's about time for me to go eat dinner. So I just wanted to show the very, very basics. I think this is probably pretty good. And so we'll leave it there. So thanks everyone for coming in, hanging out, asking some good questions. And we'll do some more advanced tutorials, but I think this is a good basis of this is how you get just a really simple overlay going and testing it out. So testing. So if you have a stream key and you just want to test bandwidth and things like that, if in your stream key, I won't show this, but if you show it so you can edit it and put question mark, I think it's bandwidth test after it. You can find those details on Twitch if you just Google Twitch bandwidth test. Then when you click go live, it won't actually stream it. But of course, if you've got your own Twitch account, just stream it to your heart's content. Let it go, see how it does with CPU, drop frames, things like that to test it out. Do it on your own. And if you're going to stream on Variant Roles, then we can give you a stream key and set all that stuff up. All right. Thanks, everybody. I am going to bow out now and eat supper. So I will see you all later. Bye.